Hey, Savio here. I wanted to make this video just to discuss a couple improvements. It's been a long time since I made that combat motion warping video, and motion warping has slightly changed since I made that video because it was highly experimental at the time and was fairly new. I'm looking at my original system from the video, up how to use motion warping for combat. And um, in that video, I show a few things. So I show how to create these events for updating combat warping through interfaces, which you might have a slightly different setup depending on what you're doing or what you're using it for. Um, the other important thing is having the motion warping window in the montage that you're playing with a matching name. So the most important thing here is your warp target name. um, Other settings I haven't really touched in here. Skew warp is also preferred for this type of stuff. I don't really use scale very often. In fact, I've never had a reason for it. So in the update combat warping, the improvements I want to talk about aren't much really. Like all of this can kind of stay the same. I do the trace part and setting my enemy reference a little bit differently now. I found some kind of more just easier ways of doing that for myself. And then we have this whole section here where we kind of grab the best hit location based on the closest arrow that you are. So in the viewport, we have these arrows here, and yeah, based off of which one you're closest to, it will use that location to warp to. That method is totally okay, and it's really visual. It's kind of nice because you can debug things nicely, so you can kind of know how your system's working a little bit better. But I have found some better methods of grabbing this location to make it a little more accurate. So it's not four-sided, but it's pretty much 360 degrees. So I'll show you guys how I've done that, which will likely improve the warping experience as a whole. Um, and yeah, the other thing about the warping name is making sure that it exactly matches what you have in your montage window. So combat target, and then I have combat target here that I'm updating. Um, this event only gets updated pretty much once, or not. It gets updated yeah, once when you begin this notify window that I made. So in the first video, I made this update combat warping notify, and receive notify begin will update combat warping, and end will reset it. So resetting will just come back here. Give me a second. Yes, sorry. I had it in a different graph here. Um, so reset combat warping here will just remove the warp target and invalidates the enemy reference. So there's a couple ways you can change this to improve it. Um, and the way that I don't really want to start from scratch because it took me a long time to kind of build out this system. But if I go to my animations, I have them in. Let's just find these and I'll video first. Okay, sorry about that. Now that I've found the right montage, so I have it's a very similar setup. I don't have them sectioned off like I did in this one, where I'm swapping between sections. I kind of do it slightly different. But the overall setup is the same when it comes to motion warping. So um, I have my motion warping window here. and I also have my motion warping window here on this one. And I have my warp target name is slightly, and you can see there's a couple more settings in here. This is in 5.6, where the other one, I originally made that in 5.1, so there might be some changes for sure. And I have so the attack target needs to match the update warp target name here. And also needs to match where you're removing it. If you don't remove it, there could be some issues where the next time you try an attack and it hits this motion warping window, that it's still holding on to the same attack target from the past. So you do want to make sure to invalidate your attack target and remove your warp target. Um, so the improvements that I've made overall to the motion warping system is mainly just how it updates things. So, what I do inside my melee trace, I have a notify that pretty much just handles all the trace logic for meleeing. That way, I can have it happen at a very specific time in my animation, rather than before, like how I was doing the in the update combat warping function in the player, where I was calculating my enemy reference in here. I no longer do that in the player, but I do it inside and notify when it fires off in my montage. So if you're interested here, I use a socket location on the hand. I have a trace distance. I ignore the owner. I have a trace radius. If successful, continue, grab all the hits, and what we're going to do is I do a couple checks here. So the first check, ignore floor, is just an exposed variable I have in the notify that you can turn on or off, because there may be some cases where you want to do like a smash attack and you still want to detect the floor or something. So that's why I left there. This function that I made here is part of a blueprint function library, and all it does is check tags. So you could, the same thing would be just having this like this. That would be the same thing. If you're interested, I just put it in there because I was using those tags lots for other things. So if it's not the ground, then we continue. And the other thing I check is to make sure that it has the interface that I am grabbing motion warping information from, which is pretty much just another check for me to make sure that before I set my enemy reference, that it's actually something that I should be damaging. So anything I can damage, like my enemies or like just a test dummy or something like that, I'll have this interface on. If that's all successful, then I use the hit actor as my pretty much enemy reference. Um, Inside this interface, I have an event called apply damage. And if you're actually, I kind of stole this method from some of the new templates, the 5.6 templates. In the combat template that they have, I will show you 5.6 templates quickly. You can find it. So
Hello
these
guys, welcome
templates
back to
here that are part of the new
Hello
5.6
Dennis.
feature stuff.
Ciao.
This one, the combat one here. So this one has interesting interface that I recommend anyone wanting to do melee combat systems look into, because it's really nice and easy to use. And essentially all they have is this extra interface where you can handle the damage event inside the actor rather than using the apply damage node um, called on the server, which I just called this inside the actor, so that I can do whatever I want within there, applying impulse, effects, switching damage classes, handling deaths, doing whatever I want can be handled inside the actor that has this damageable interface, which in this case is my enemies. And I'll show you, I have an easier example here. So I actually took this combat dummy from that combat example as well. It's the exact same one. I kind of liked it, so it was a good little test dummy. And I pretty much stole this interface just temporarily, so I could test how my motion warping was working. So all it does is apply impulse on the dummy and spawns some effects. Obviously, if I wanted to actually apply damage to this, then I could apply damage from here, and just the damage actor would be myself in this case. And then I would just input anything I wanted from here. And if I needed extra inputs, I just add them to the interface. So this is what the interface looks like. All it has is the one event apply damage, and then I have this other thing called get properties for motion warping, which is something custom that I made. And it's just a structure called properties for motion warping. So if I find that, so it's a structure. It has a few different variables in it. One is a bool called should motion warp. One is dead. The other is a radius, and the last one's an offset. So in my combat dummy, in my interface here, I have just I just make properties directly from here. Um, Obviously, you could dynamically change these based on the state of your player. So if you're AI, then you could have like a state manager system that determines if it's dead. That way, um, if this is a motion warping capable object, the reason I had the should motion warp rule is to fully disable or enable it if I still wanted an object to have this damageable interface. That way I could still apply damage and stuff to it, but I didn't want it to be a motion warping object. Then I could just turn this off. The is dead bool is to also disable it. So even if this is true and dead is true, it still won't motion warp. Um, that way it's not trying to warp to dead enemies. The radius of 100. So this is the kind of new things that I've added to this system to make it a little bit easier to calculate where you're going to be warping to on your object. So um, the radius of 100 will offset from from the location of the actor. It'll offset it 100 degrees or 100 units in any direction. That's kind of like where you want to warp to from the origin of this actor's location. So, um, so this actor sitting here, 100 units would be like right here. So when I went to motion warp on this side or attack the guy on this side, my warp target location would be 100 units from the center of this. And that's kind of uh, that's kind of a way to visualize it. Um, I set up a little thing here so I could show you a little bit more, but I have this little button. So um, I test visualization because it doesn't have because I'm just an editor and I don't have a player. It's always going to be 0, 0 for where I am. But you can see here, this is where it's going to. If I was standing like right here, it would attempt to set my warping location to the center of where that circle is. So, and to show you that it does dynamically switch, if I move that now, it's still getting 0, 0, because that's where it thinks my player is right now because one doesn't exist. But it will go anywhere around a 360 degree from your target. Um, so that's apply damage through the damageable interface and the get properties for motion warping. So you can see in my melee trace, after I apply damage, I get properties for motion warping. If I allow motion warping, and I don't do the dead check here, but I could do right here. I could also just do a branch, and I never set this up. That's why I didn't have it here. But I could just say not dead, and if they're not dead, then still set the attack target. Testing, I'm just going to leave that how I had it. And then the set attack target. So this belongs on the character. So on the character, this is pretty much the equivalent to what I would have for the update in the old notify update combat warping, it's pretty much equivalent to this. I'm updating my combat warping. The only difference is now I am grabbing my enemy reference before I even call the interface on my player. That way, if the enemy doesn't exist, it's never going to make that call back to the player. So a little bit safer of a setup, in my opinion. So once the character receives this, then I call a couple things. So just close those up here. Go to the event graph. So I have an interface very similar to um, the update motion warping, update combat warping, sorry. It's been a long time since I've been in this project. Sorry about that. So very similar to this. I have this in my player, but rather than me calculating everything inside here with the trace logic, I've already calculated it previous to getting here. So this event will either set an attack target or invalidate it. So once it's set, you can see I have it set as a rep notify. And a rep notify, for people that might not be aware or have ever worked with multiplayer in Unreal, rep notifies are a great way to broadcast something to all the players. So in this case, I'm not replicating this event. So I'm just essentially using this rep notify as a place to handle logic whenever this variable changes, which is also a great way of thinking of it. So every time I set this attack target, whether it be a valid actor or just nothing, it's going to call everything inside of this event. So when you create a rep notify under the replication tab, it will create a matching function called onRep underscore whatever your variable is. And then it will call this anytime I change this variable. So if I set it to a valid attack target, which would come from here. So if this actor is valid, which in this case it should be, then I will receive this. It will say, hey, I'm valid. It'll check to see how far away I am, so my actor location, from the new attack target location. The reason I do this is just to prevent you being too far away from your target and you just like launching across the level or something, or the target dies and it doesn't get rid of this. Then this is just kind of an extra safety check to make sure that it doesn't try warping to something that's too far away. Obviously, you could make this an instance editable variable. You could even make this part of your properties for motion warping, which is something I've thought of doing, is having specific distances based off the target. It's just another customization thing you could do. So if you are farther away than 600 units from your attack target, then I just remove it. And same with if the target is invalid, I just remove it. So that was kind of a better way I found of handling this, rather than having separate interface events. Why does it keep going back to, like, I don't want that. Okay. Yeah, rather than having the reset combat warping and having two separate functions for them, I just have the one, and I just put in either valid or invalid attack target essentially. Um, so I also do these checks on the player side. So your attack target, I grab the properties for motion warping again, and if they should motion warp and they're not dead. So this is where I do a dead check. I actually think this, yeah, I actually did this on purpose. My bad. You could have it here as well, but in this case, I always update the attack target anyways. So both ways would work really. You could check dead on both sides if you wanted to. So if they are dead, I do remove the target, because I don't want to continue with that. Um, and then here's the new logic that, if you don't change anything before adding or updating your warp target, or like you decide to keep all of this, which is totally fine, and then all you want to change and improve is the directional part, then this would be the time of the video for you. So I have, from my motion warping, and obviously this radius could be the same. Like if I just set this to a default value, let's just say my offset's always going to be 100 and my radius is always going to be 100, then I'll still get similar results. So you don't exactly need this interface event to grab motion warping. It's just something handy I like to do, because now every object or actor that has this interface, I can have custom settings for it. So that was the only reason I did that. But now comes the interesting part. So I have this collapsed graph inside of this node, which has a little bit of math in it. The offset's really easy. I'm just grabbing my attack target's location and adding value. So this is relative. It's not doing anything extra to try and make up for, you know, where your actor's facing or the forward vector of anything. It's just a direct offset. So really, I was only using it for a Z offset. Um, the reason being is because in actors, for example, my combat dummy, the origin of this actor is always going to be at the bottom of where this is located. So when sitting on the ground right here, this would be where the attack target is getting, is at the bottom. Where a character is slightly different because the capsule is centered, so the pivot point will be coming from the center of him anyways. So I more just use the offset to bring the location up to about here. Um, yeah, about there. You can see if I set my properties, if I set this to 0 and I try that, it's, oh, wait, oh, I never did that. So my offset be 0. Um, yeah, I just did that as a test, so I never updated it. You can see it's sitting on the ground here now, rather than being up in almost the center of that object. So that's kind of why I like to have the offset option, and I mainly just use it for the Z axis. So with all of that, let's hop into the actual direction logic. This is pretty much all it is. It's pretty simple. The first important thing is that I'm multiplying the radius by uh, an important equation. So I'm finding the look at rotation from the target world location, which would be the um, coming from my offset. So that's why I set this first. So I calculate the offset first, where we're going to be actually where the target is. So in most cases, it can essentially just be where your attack target location is. Um, so my attack target location, from there to where my character is, I'm going to find the look at rotation from that. The attack target, I'm going to get the forward vector of that, and I'm going to unrotate the actor's rotation. Now, this is important because if you don't do this, then you'll get some really weird results. Where if your actor is not 0, 0, so I have 0, 0, 0 rotation on here. So if you were to rotate it 150 degrees, and let's say it's a movable character in your world that it doesn't really care where it's rotating, it'll rotate whatever direction it's facing, then we just unrotate that by their by whatever rotation they have, mainly just to zero it out, so that we can use the look at rotation um, to re-rotate the vector back in the direction that we want, which would be facing our player. Um, then we multiply that by the radius, which is pretty much the distance. So we're almost doing like a forward trace from, we're doing like a backwards forward trace from the enemy's location to our character. Um, then what I'm doing is I'm adding that to the already existing target location that we set before. That way it's not like, adding it to 0, 0 in the world or something like that, because this will output world space location. Um, and then the rotation, I just use my already existing X and Y rotation, because we don't want to have the character tilt back or forth or sideways or anything like that in this case. So um, I just use the Z axis, and I do the opposite. So rather than finding the lookout rotation from my enemy to myself, I find it from myself to my enemy. So I just switch these around, and then that will give me my Z rotation that my warp target needs. So that's the only difference between um, kind of this system in the way that I'm calculating where to warp to, and this system with the arrows. So you can essentially, scrap um, all of this, and from here you would just get properties from motion warping if this existed in this project, and then you would move forwards with this stuff. Um, you can, if you want, the a good way of doing it would be to invalidate your warp target here off of is not valid, um, or grab this warp target inside, like before all of this, and um, if it's invalid right away, or it's not an actor that can use motion warping, so should motion something like should motion warp, then you can just remove the warp target. Um, and obviously, you would want to also invalidate your enemy target. If I mean, it's already going to be invalid in this case, so you don't really have to do that. But if you wanted to forcefully remove your warp target, like we did here, then you could always leave this, and you can call this from wherever you need, like at the end of a montage, in its own notify, or you could keep this so that it still removes it. Some last and final notes I wanted to make is if you're having issues where maybe some of your stuff's not working, um, besides checking the motion warping names, there's a couple things you can do. So um, I have um, right here my melee trace, which I explained at the start, is the thing that updates my attack target reference. So it will set this and call this function. Um, because this doesn't get called till here, I almost need to make sure that I have an attack target before it starts motion warping, right? So with this system that I have four attacks, sorry, that can feed into each other in a combo. So just picture these four, combo 1, 2, 3, 4, and as you successfully hit combos, it will go from 1, 2, 3, 4. Um, so same as the sectional way here is it will pop through 1, 2, 3, 4. Um, I just play different montages now. That's all. That's the only difference rather than swapping sections. Um, but in this case, when I fire my first attack, if I don't have a motion warping target before before I attack, then it's not going to motion warp on the first attack because it's not going to be setting a successful target till here. So it'll set the first target here, and then on the second attack, it will successfully motion warp during these windows because it already has the attack. And then the melee trace will be updating where that target is for the next swing. Um, Hopefully that makes sense. But there is a way that I was able to handle this a little bit differently. For example, a charged attack. So with a charged attack, it's a single kind of one-off thing where you almost want to have your attack target set before you start motion warping and before you start your melee trace and update that location once more. So so I have this charged attack, and the charged attack is sectioned. But you can see I have one extra um, thing here, which you could replicate yourself, which just pre-checks for attack target. So it pretty much has the same logic that I had inside the melee trace, um, where I trace for a target. So this stuff here, ignoring the impulse and stuff like that. So if I go into this, I'll show you exactly what's in there. Same exact start. So I multi-sphere trace with the exact same settings, pretty much. And I do a floor check. Because this is running on tick, you need a world context object. So I just use the mesh owner. Um, the single off notifies events don't require a world context object. Um, if successful, then I store the distance and I grab properties for motion warping again. If we should warp, then I continue to update the closest distance to target. So um, this way, I if I am detecting multiple enemies, what it will do is it will only store the closest one. So it'll take priority over whoever's closest to you. So, for example, if I'm standing here and I'm trying to attack one of these three enemies, it's not going to try and warp to this guy if it accidentally detects all three of them during the line trace, because I am using a multi-sphere trace. So if it detects all three of them, then it's going to take the closest one, which where I am now is going to be this guy in this case. And that's essentially all it does. At the end of completing, I set the attack target. So um, that way it will continue to run through these loops every time it finishes going through all of the actors it hits. It will set the attack target if successful. So that's kind of how I um, pre determine my attack target before starting motion warping in cases where I need that attack target to motion warp before I do anything. Um, yeah, in the normal combats I don't have that pre-check for attack target because I'm not really too worried about the first attack not having motion warping. Um, Mainly because it's kind of a skill thing in games, I guess. If you miss your first attack, then the motion warping is a great way of giving a player an assist to their next attack, in my opinion. So I don't like forcing that on the first basic combo because um, in this case I'm like, okay, you have to hit your first attack successfully in order for you to continue getting that assist into your next combos, um, which has worked out really well for me. And then, yeah, with the charged attacks or attacks that I do need an attack target set previously to motion warping, then I can use this system. Um, the last reminder that I have for everyone using motion warping is inside your actual animations, making sure that you have root motion enabled. If you don't have root motion enabled on your attacks, then motion warping just won't work. Motion warping does require. Trying to find this charged attack again. It does require root motion animations, so that is a must if you're using motion warping, is to make sure your animation has root motion on. And yeah, if you have any questions or you want a little more deep dive into something specific, I'm happy to make another video. Like I said at the start, I don't really want to build it from scratch if I don't have to, but my Discord, Plague Doctor Studios, is a great place to contact me if you have any questions. And if you have some specific things you'd like me to talk about that I maybe didn't fully cover in this video, then feel free to leave something in the help section. Um, you can leave a new post. Doesn't really matter if I'll see it if you leave it, as it hasn't been very active lately. So um, yeah, in order to see this game development channel as well, once you get into the server, you'll have to select a role. So the creator role will give you access to the game development section, and will give you access to the help section where you can create posts and ask me for anything you might need. As yeah, I didn't really build this one from scratch like I did the original one. I just wanted to show you some improvements that I've made, and keep it open for questions. And yeah, thank you for watching. Let me know if you need anything else.